Welcome back to Film Addiction, where we talk about the hugest and coolest films hitting the multiplex and available to watch on an app. From Northern California, I'm... Will, are you okay?
Yeah.
Okay, you seem a little confused. We've been doing the show every week, and I don't know, I've never seen you look so bewildered while we're doing the normal intro we do every week for the show.
I gotta be honest. Who are you?
I'm Jonathan Negroni, the host of Film Addiction, where we talk about the hugest and coolest films. You know this, William T. We've been doing this show for years. How could you forget?
Okay, this seems very normal, except Film Addiction. That doesn't ring a bell.
Well, I'm sure it does, because I'm the one who came up with the name for it. You've never let me live that down, huh?
Yeah.
I can't imagine in what universe you would have come up with the name of a podcast that we hosted together.
Okay. Are you drunk? Have you hit your head? Should I call medical assistance?
I don't understand what you're even talking about, Will. I feel like you're trying to sabotage our big episode where we're reviewing Petite Maman, the biggest movie coming out in theaters this week. I don't know, Will. It just seems like you're in a whole different universe than me.
I guess. Okay, so I usually host a podcast with John Negroni called Cinemaholics. We talk about the biggest and best films hitting theaters and on streaming.
What?
John talks about how he's from the San Francisco Bay Area.
Whoa, that's... what? Wait, I'm Jonathan. Like, wait, who called... John, though? That's interesting.
Okay.
That would save a lot of time.
And then he'll be like from the Pittsburgh area. He's a scallywag who ain't up to no good or something. He'll say some kind of weird intro and then introduce me, and I say something like, howdy.
Wait, hold on. In this universe, do you still... I mean, you still do your like podcast with Matt Serafini, right? Where you talk about all the Madagascar movies?
Well, that's not right. No. We're talking about Shrek. Madagascar.
Shrek? Why would you talk about Shrek? Madagascar is the biggest DreamWorks movie of the decade. Like, to this day, they do spin-offs. Like, wait, Shrek? That only had one movie.
Oh, only had one movie?
Yeah, they never did a Shrek sequel. No one went out to see it. And remember, it lost to Monsters, Inc. for Best Picture?
I don't know what you're talking about. On the podcast, we discussed Shrek 2. That's our theme this year.
Shrek 2? You are from another universe.
Oh, boy.
You know, this strangely sounds almost kind of similar to a movie I just watched last week.
Oh, okay.
It was called Everything Everywhere All at Once. It's the newest Marvel movie.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's like the 27th Marvel. Do you have Marvel movies?
Yeah. So we have a movie that just came out this weekend that I saw called Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness.
What?
It's the 28th film in the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
That sounds a little bit like a comic book movie. I mean, if you want comic book movies, you need to go to DC. DC has all of the biggest and like most successful comic book movies.
Okay, well, I mean, DC does have comic book movies, but they're at the moment, they're kind of second fiddle to the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Second fiddle? You mean Batman and Superman? Second fiddle to like what? Did they ever? Okay, all right, yeah, I'm sure. Wake me up when you have like an Ant-Man movie. Okay.
Well, we do have an Ant-Man, several, or at least a couple.
Wait, what?
We have at least 2 Ant-Man movies, along with some appearances from Ant-Man and other movies.
Well, I'm starting to get a little scared. Your universe sounds kind of nice, but it seems kind of scary too. Should I just let you go back to like where you came from?
You know what? That might be nice.
Okay, let me see if I can press a knob here or a button here. It was nice talking to you. Can you ask John what's it like just being John instead of Jonathan? Never mind. You probably shouldn't mess up with any like timelines or anything that could get weird. Like we learned in a lot of DC movies that are super successful.
All right, yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
Right.
See ya.
Yeah, good talking to you.
Will, you're just staring at the screen. Will, we need to start the show.
What?
We need to start Cinemaholics.
Huh?
Will, are you okay? It looked like you were daydreaming or something.
Yeah, sorry. I had a dream and you were there and Well, I guess it was just you.
Okay, well, I think you need to stop dreaming because this is a down to earth podcast. This is a grounded. We don't get silly on this show, Cinemaholics.
That is true. Yeah, I guess
Yeah.
that's a fair point.
All right.
This is a no nonsense podcast, as it is described in the iTunes descriptions.
No nonsense conversations about the biggest. Well, I guess we're just cutting to the intro. Welcome back to Cinemaholics, a major motion podcast where we talk about the biggest and best films coming to theaters and streaming online. But that's weird. Usually I say welcome once again, but I don't know. Something about what you just said, Will, made me want to say welcome back. That's weird. I'm a little weirded out.
Okay.
Anyway, I'm John Negroni from San Francisco. And yeah, I'm the film editor for The Young Folks. And you're from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
True. Yeah. I have a random question for you, though. Do you prefer to be called Jonathan?
Jonathan?
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
I've been calling myself John since I was in the 7th grade. So
Okay. Yeah. Sorry.
That's
Just a question that came to mind.
I don't know what you've been up to over at Collider, where you're a news and entertainment writer, but it's kind of weirding me out, Will. But okay.
Yeah.
This week, we're talking about Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, a movie about multiverses, our second big one, I guess, of 2022. We real quick, before we start talking about the newest Marvel, which, of course, we do. We talk about Marvel pretty often on the show. Will loves it. Will loves the Marvel movies, John said sarcastically.
Another multiverse?
Yeah, another multiverse. That's funny. Can you imagine if we were in a multiverse right now? Anyway, so there is another. Will, are there any other movies that came out this past week? Anything else that because I know Happening is playing in some places. Petite Maman, is playing at 2 French films. Both of them. I haven't. So I'm about to finish Happening. I have a screener, and I'm very much into it. It's very, very good. Petite Maman, wonderful movie. I've been trying to spread the word for Petite Maman to anybody I know in the Bay Area who's looking for something kind of new and fun, that's not super heavy. So, what are you looking at?
Yeah, I mean, those are the 2 that I know about for sure. I haven't had the chance to see Happening yet. I hope to see it soon. We're playing it at the theater where I work. So I hope to see that at some point later this month. However, I have seen Petite Maman. I saw that last year at the Three Rivers Film Festival, and I believe you saw it at TIFF.
Yeah,
if I recall correctly. Lovely little movie. I mean, I kind of figured it was going to get overshadowed coming against the new MCU Marvel movie, but I mean, if you can nestle some time, I mean, it's only 72 minutes if I recall correctly. It's a really easy, breezy watch. If you can squeeze that in either before or after you see Doctor Strange, I would highly recommend you do so. Yeah,
I agree. And look, if you're listening to us and you're like, sorry, John, Will, I'm a cinemaholic, but that doesn't mean I like French indie films, I want something a little bit different. Well, I would say The Bad Guys is still playing in theaters. And I know we already talked about The Bad Guys on the show, but it's been doing pretty well. Its box office actually, well, I don't know if you saw. I mean, worldwide, it's coming up to 150 million, which is, pretty good for a movie at its budget. And also The Northman and Everything Everywhere All at Once. If you look at what's playing right now and what's getting re-released, even as Doctor Strange is dominating a lot of screens now that it's hitting movie theaters, right? You have a lot of other choices. Now I know Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent is out there too, and I don't know. I'm going to check to see how that's doing box office wise. Have you looked at the box office for Unbearable Weight lately?
I have not. I don't think it's doing too hot.
I imagine it isn't. I'm looking it up now because I haven't since we talked about it. Let's see. It looks like it's only made 20 million worldwide, 20.8 million. It's really bad because it was playing in over 3,000 theaters. They clearly had bigger expectations for this.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I can't say I'm surprised per se, but I mean, it is. I mean, it's just kind of a disappointing turn of events given the film itself, and also the fact that people didn't really show up to see a original heady-ish comedy starring the one and only Nicolas Cage.
I think the word of mouth might have been a little tricky on it because I know it got good reviews, but there were people like me who were saying yeah, it's okay. I don't know. I don't think people were super stoked about it, but I guess.
I mean,
it still is sad to me that I'm looking at Fantastic Beasts just to see how that's been doing. That's been in theaters for a few weeks now. It played in over 4,200 theaters and it's made 363.7 million worldwide. I don't think it's going to make that much more now that it's been a month in theaters. So That's a lot. I mean, it's been a month, I think, over since it was in the UK too, right? It might be like 3 weeks in the US. I'd have to double check that, but yeah.
Yeah.
Most of that's international, 76% international.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Like we said before, it's kind of like a classic South by Southwest or Sundance thing where people hype up a movie a little bit too much. Like, I mean,
you're back on Unbearable Weight, right?
Yeah. With Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent, I feel like it's not terrible. It's just a little disappointing. It just never quite reaches the heights that it should be. But for whatever reason, I don't know what was in their, margaritas over at South by, but they were really digging that film, which is nice. I mean, I'm not trying to like downplay their enthusiasm for it, but I do agree. I think when I've talked to people after the fact, they kind of have the same reaction of like, oh yeah, it was fine, I guess. I mean, like, I guess I was just expecting something more. It has kind of a rudimentary plot with, like kind of like an irony coating on it that I felt like they could have done a little bit more to make it weirder or, a little bit more in tune to Nicolas Cage's sensibilities. And it just kind of seemed like it was more playing into the meme of Nicolas Cage and Nicolas Cage as we know him now. So, yeah, unfortunately, I just think it was a fairly underwhelming film. Though I would like to see more movies like it from the studio system for sure.
I'm just kind of like glancing around because Fantastic Beasts. I mean, that is such a hit. Like I know when the movie was coming out, people were like, you know what? It's doing fine. It's like on par. But I mean, the movie's not going to make like much more than it has. It's at 363 million, as I said. Crimes of Grindelwald, that made double that. Crimes of Grindelwald made like 654 million worldwide. And then the first Fantastic Beast made over 800 million. So that's, wow. I'm really curious if Warner Brothers is going to actually move forward with another movie at this point, because based on that diminishing returns, if they spend another, how much does it cost to make these movies? Like $200 million after all the marketing costs and all the mayhem. I don't know. I don't know if the math is going to work out for them. We didn't see it. And, so
yeah, I mean, they also did like a ton of reshoots, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean,
yeah,
I think, no, I don't think like an amount that's, I mean, they did a lot of reshoots, but I feel like that's a pretty typical expense for movies of this size.
Well, sure. But I felt like they did more than your average film. It's kind of hard to say at this point because
it is hard to say. I mean, common. Some movies do like extensive reshoots and you can't even tell. Like big budget stuff.
Speaking of films with a lot of reshoots, there's a film we're reviewing this week.
Well, hold on. I was going to get to The Northman. I just want to make sure, because I just want the listeners to kind of get a check-in because the summer's kicking off and we had a very interesting spring. The Northman. How do you think that movie is done? Because we were kind of negative about it, right? We were like, is this going to like be a leggy movie? Are people going to catch up with it?
Negative in terms of like we were cynical about it doing well, but
that's what I'm saying.
Positive on the film, to be sure.
We were very positive on the film.
I think it's not doing too hot, but I want to say it's not doing like awful at the same time.
It is a little hard to say because the domestic international split is almost 50-50. I mean, it's pretty close, and that's a good sign for a movie like this. It's at 51.5 million worldwide. Its budget anywhere between 70 and 90 million estimated. So, I mean, yeah, it's losing money. I don't think there's any way around that, but I guess it's like not like the gargantuan flop that I think we were fearing, right? I was worried that it was going to crap out at like 28 million worldwide or something like that, which would be horrific. But I mean, it made a little bit more than that at least. So yeah, it's a strange time for the box office because you have a lot of different kinds of movies, lots of kind of big movies, right? Like the ones we just talked about. A lot of these are very interesting flicks, and you're not starved for choices. But I do get the sense, I don't know if you've been to any like bigger theaters recently, since Doctor Strange came out. I imagine that like most theaters in San Francisco that are not like the indie theaters are just like wall to wall Doctor Strange. And so it might be super hard for a lot of these movies to get any screens, any times or anything like that, unless it's like a 24 screen AMC or something.
Sure. But I do kind of wonder if some of these movies are maybe getting a boost because of Doctor Strange doing so well that, like, they're probably selling out certain shows. So maybe a movie like Northman is getting a boost because, like, they can't get into Doctor Strange, but they wanted to see Northman. It's like, well, we're here. Might as well see something.
Yeah.
I would love to see someone. I joked about this on Twitter, but I would love to see someone in like full Doctor Strange garb, like quietly sitting to watch Gaspar Noé's Vortex.
Are you gonna watch that?
Vortex? I hope so. I wanted to see it today. I found out rather last minute that it's playing near me.
Oh.
It came out in New York, I think just New York, the week prior. It did really well, and then it got a expansion this past week. I thought it was going to be a little bit later in the month, so I'll see it as soon as I can for sure.
Awesome.
But I've heard it's fantastic. I mean, I know you're not the biggest Gaspar Noé fan, but I've heard it's a quite a departure from his previous films. I don't know if you've heard much more than that.
I haven't heard anything. I haven't watched a trailer. I thought Climax was, a good, respectable film. Not my exact cup of tea. Better than Love. And I haven't seen a lot of his other features.
To be fair, yeah. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm willing to give it a chance. It's not the kind of movie. He's not the kind of director I would go see in a theater, because I just know that I'll be uncomfortable in public watching one of these things.
Well, this one, it's kind of more like a more.
I don't know. I don't want to know anything. I'm just going to go in with my expectations based on what I've seen previously, which is that he's a very weird filmmaker. He does things in a very strange way. I guess I just I don't have high expectations. I hope they are dashed in a good way. The last thing I was going to mention too, Everything Everywhere All at Once, big box office success. I mean, that one of the best success stories of the year, I think, especially for indie movies, right? Because this movie has made 45 million worldwide. Almost all of that is domestic. Super low budget of a movie, even though it's such a spectacle of a movie, $25 million budget. It's clearly successful. They've been rolling it out to more theaters as time has gone on. That is a word of mouth. That's a leggy movie. So we can end on some good news for the spring. The spring has seen some movies like that and RRR just totally blast off. And people love it so much they tell their friends to see it, and it made money. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, I would hope, more people are feeling encouraged to go see Everything Everywhere All at Once. It's, like you said, one of the best.
The movie, not the concept.
Sure. I mean, I just feel like if you have the chance to see one gigantic multiverse movie in theaters right now, that would be my pick. But that's not to
say here
anything about Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, which we'll have a long, hearty, and maybe even contentious conversation about.
I don't know.
In a matter of minutes.
A matter of seconds, because I think it's time to get into it. This is the newest Marvel movie. How many Marvel movies have there been now? 28?
I believe this is the 28th film.
Okay.
If you're not counting like Venom and all
we're
those
talking,
Yeah.
Because Venom there was Venom content in the Marvel Cinematic Universe because he had a cameo, but it's not a Marvel Cinematic Universe movie. It's a Sony superhero universe movie.
It's the same as like you don't count like you don't count like the X-Men movies. You don't count like Sam Raimi's Spider-Mans. You don't count the Andrew Garfield ones, even though those are all now interwoven.
We're counting. We start with Iron Man. We go through like the Avengers phases. Yeah. And it also includes stuff like from the Netflix shows and like the Hulu stuff that they sort of did like in the 2010s, but most of those shows never really connected, right? I mean, they had offhand references, but that was about it.
Yeah, I mean,
with the exception of Daredevil.
Right. Well, the Disney Plus ones do connect, but the like you said, like Daredevil and the Netflix ones, and then a few of the Hulu ones, and were there a few on Freeform as well? And ABC, yeah.
There was like Runaways. Cloak and Dagger, I think was the Freeform one, or CW or something like that. They're all like loosely connected, but not directly connected outside of the Disney Plus ones. They were trying to sort of mimic the Arrowverse formula, right? That was the Greg Berlanti, they had Arrow in 2010, 2011, and then that was connecting with like Flash, and that was connecting with Legends of Tomorrow, and that was a big success for the CW, and they even would like bring in Supergirl from CBS, and then eventually Supergirl went to CW because, so Marvel, I think, was going for that kind of strategy. I think one of the best decisions they have made sort of in the lead up to the post Avengers Endgame era of their movies was the Disney Plus content, which I know for you is probably not like you probably don't have a lot of opinions on that, right? Because you haven't really watched any of the Disney Plus shows. Yeah. But you at least probably have an impression of, well, you probably have an impression though of how those shows have kind of landed with people, right? And how they've sort of I don't know. I think maybe invigorated at least some sort of like Marvel, like, I don't know, placation. What you're cringing.
I feel like it's been real hit and miss. Like, it seems like people liked, to an extent, WandaVision. At least there were a lot of people talking about it. That was
I think
the
you're
first
underselling
one.
how much people liked WandaVision. I think WandaVision was a straight up hit.
I think people liked in the beginning. I think it kind of split people as it went along. Is that fair to say?
I think some people were a little bit like, but that was a water cooler show. That was a show that, it didn't stick the landing for everybody, but it was like, especially just for like every casual people, that was something that made them really like Scarlet Witch.
Sure.
Like Wanda for the first time,
Maybe. I mean, I don't know. It seemed like the conversation around it shifted as it
with
kept
critics,
going
but
on.
General audiences, I think, were way more forgiving. They were just like, oh, cool. That was a cool show. And there were a lot of people who were like, people like me, people like you, if you had seen it, who were kind of like, it could have ended better.
But it did seem like people were generally favorable on Loki.
Loki's the bigger critical success, not as big a like massive success as WandaVision, like not as much pop culture power, but that was a show that like the critics liked, audiences liked, like that was like a pretty warm favorite.
And then the rest seemed to be either middling or just outright flops. Like Captain America and Winter Soldier seems to be a flop.
I wouldn't call that a flop. I would call it like a buzzy show that sucked, like, and that people were really disappointed in. But people watched it, and people were kind of like, people were into it for a few weeks, and then it sort of bled viewers. I wouldn't say it's a flop though, because it did do super well. And then Hawkeye was like definitely not a flop, because I think Hawkeye also did pretty well, but it was also sort of like, that was okay. It got like middling reviews, right?
I guess so. Yeah, people, I mean, it just seemed like
it just vaporized in the wind after it came out.
Right. Yeah, that's
No Way Home.
Yeah, like that was just a show that like once people were talking about Moon Knight, which also seems to be more panned than acclaimed.
Yes.
As far as at least people in my circles.
It has its fans.
Yeah.
Moon Knight has its fans. I'm not one of them. I think Moon Knight is disastrously disappointing, because Moon Knight should be my favorite out of all these. It just should. And we did mention What If. I think What If was kind of just like a curiosity sort of thing. It was kind of fun. People who actually checked it out, I think generally thought it was fun, but it wasn't a big deal.
I mean, that was one I was most interested in. And then I saw the animation style. I was like, nope, not watching that. I thought the animation
style was fine. I think it worked for the format. And I thought it was nice to have like some context for some of the stuff that happens in Doctor Strange. I was actually kind of impressed with that. They actually included some references there, but but no, with Moon Knight, that has everything I love in terms of, like, I love Oscar Isaac. I love like The Mummy. I love like swashbuckling adventure stories and like all of that cool stuff. And then weaving in Moon Knight is a really cool character, but that show has like the propulsion of like a Model T that's been broken for 5 years. Like, it is just a slow, agonizing show with really just awkward characters who I just did not really love, with the exception of like one or two. It has like weird stuff in it. It has stuff in it where, like, I don't want to give anything away for you, I guess, because I don't think you're ever going to watch it. But, there's like for people who are listening, at least, there's a character who shows up like halfway through it. I'm just like, where's this show? Where it's kind of becoming a little bit more fun, a little bit more like wacky. Even Ethan Hawke, one of our great actors, is just kind of just sleepwalking through this thing. And I know it has its fans though, who are like, no, I really like this. I think it's really great. But I think it's going to be like a lot of these other Marvel things where, like, in a couple months, they're never going to think about it again.
Sure. Yeah. I was actually talking to Chris Sheridan, speaking of Ain't Ogre Till It's Ogre.
Dear friend of podcast.
I mean, yeah, this is the first time we're talking about Ain't Ogre Till It's Ogre.
Yeah. Yeah, of course it is. You're confusing me, Will.
Sorry. I was talking to Chris Sheridan, my co-host on A Ogre to Its Ogre, and he was saying about how much he liked Moon Knight, and I didn't say it in a critical way, just kind of just like being open. I was like, I'll be honest, you're the first person I've seen really go bat for the show. And he's like, what do you mean? I was like, this has been largely panned on like my timelines. And he's like, whoa, what? Like he just hadn't seen this like this like negativity directed towards the show.
Oh yeah.
And I was kind of surprised. I mean, like I from everywhere I've seen, like on Twitter and on like my Facebook, and then like you said, critically, I feel like it's been pretty like middling to disappointed with the show. Like there's a few people like, yeah, it's not that bad, but I feel like it's been generally not well received.
Yeah, I haven't seen like people being like, wow, this show's awesome. I haven't seen that from a single person.
Yeah, I've just seen people say it's like kind of corny, and
I've
like
heard people, I've heard people be like, oh, this is kind of fun. It's like different. There have been like podcasts I've listened to where it's like one person on the panel will be like, no, I like it. And the other people are like, yeah, it's pretty mid. And, the people I know, just like the people I know in my life who've seen it, who are Marvel fans, like none of them have liked it. Like the ones I know who've even tried watching it have just been like, yeah, this is nah. And I'm certainly one of those people. So I don't know.
But those are all the ones that have aired, right? We haven't missed any.
I don't think we missed any. Yeah.
Okay.
But I still say that I think that the Disney Plus thing, first of all, it kept the Marvel like cinematic universe like kind of in pop culture during the harshest phase of the pandemic, right? When everything was locked down and we didn't really have Marvel movies coming to theaters for quite a while, right? It was a while before Black Widow finally came out. And then I think Black Widow, Shang-Chi, and Eternals were kind of wet blankets in terms of like making noise as like, I don't think any of those movies had anywhere near the same sort of, maybe Shang-Chi almost did the same sort of like cultural resonance as like WandaVision and Loki. I think Spider-Man No Way Home has been like the only Marvel thing lately, outside of the Disney Plus stuff that people seem to really be into.
Yeah, I mean, well, certainly I think Black Widow underperformed. That was also kind of marred by them trying to put it on Disney Plus with that Mulan strategy where it was like $30 you could rent it thing. Mm-hmm. And then Eternals just like, I think it was just an outright flop, right? Like critically, commercially, box office wise, however you want to look at it, was not well received. But yeah, like Spider-Man's kind of like the return, I guess, for the movies. So I think Shang-Chi did pretty well, like commercially. I think people were favorable on it. Like, I don't know if there's anyone that's like it's their favorite MCU movie, but I would say
it was just kind of like it did okay. I think it was like one of those movies that it made some money. It wasn't a huge hit. It wasn't a huge success. Like, it didn't really launch this character in a way that some of the other solo Marvel films have. It was something a little bit more like the first Thor, something like that, where people are like, oh yeah, this is cool. Like, not a movie that I think would generate huge box office returns.
I guess I don't know. I think it did better than you're saying, but I
mean, we can look up the box office. I'm pretty sure the box office was not that great.
I thought it did pretty well. I don't know. I mean, I thought that was like the first time when people were like, okay, movies are kind of coming back, and then Eternals didn't do well, and they were like, I don't know, and then Spider-Man was like, all right, yeah. Well, actually, before that, Venom.
It made 432 worldwide, which that's not very good for a Marvel film. Like, I mean,
is that not?
I mean, it was better than I think Black Widow, maybe, but I mean, it wasn't also simultaneous streaming like Black Widow was on Disney Plus. So like the Black Widow thing is kind of hard to measure because a lot of people bought that through Disney Plus, right? Now, yeah, because I'm looking at Black Widow here, it's $379.
Okay.
And yeah, because I think like what did the first Ant-Man make, right? First Ant-Man, I think,
did that like 500 million or something
like that. Which you have to imagine that a movie called Ant-Man, 519 million. Yeah, you have Paul Rudd kind of leading it, but I don't know. I think that Shang-Chi making that much less in a movie like 6-7 years, 6 years after, I think that feels like a little bit of a step down.
I mean, certainly if we're going to compare it to something like the first Doctor Strange, which I think did like pretty like 700 million maybe, or like maybe higher. Obviously, that's like a pre-pandemic thing, but so was Ant-Man.
Yeah, 677 million. But I do think that, you can say that, but then what about Free Guy? Free Guy came out around the same time as Shang-Chi. And that's, same pandemic circumstances. That was like a non-IP Ryan Reynolds movie. It made 331 million. Then that didn't have like the Marvel machine behind it.
Sure.
So I don't know. I kind of look at these box office totals. Like I think that we are kind of moving away from being able to blame the pandemic for this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, well, I'm not blaming the pandemic. I'm just kind of trying to contextualize it where like it's hard. Like last year was really hard to like compare and contrast. Like, it's like, what is a hit? What's the studio really looking for? Like, obviously, like Warner Brothers was like more preoccupied with getting HBO Max out there than to the point where they, decimated their box office basically.
Yeah.
But I mean, I would say as far as the films themselves, quality wise, I would say certainly Shang-Chi was the best of the 2011 MCU films. So that's not really saying much in my opinion.
I don't think it was better than Spider-Man No Way Home. Because I think Spider-Man No Way Home,
better, but I know we disagree.
We disagree, and I think the main reason is because Shang-Chi has a killer first half. I mean, the first half of Shang-Chi is incredibly good. The second half, I think, is incredibly boring and not as good.
I think it's mostly the last act. I think the second act's fine. The third act is where it just kind of gets muddled and boring.
Once they get past like the sequence in where they're like in the building and they're fighting on like the rafters and everything, like everything after that, I think it just loses all of its energy. It's like, and that's more than the third act. I think that's like right at the midpoint almost. But yeah,
it kind of picks up a little bit after that when we get kind of more of like Shang-Chi's backstory and stuff like that. But I agree, like once we kind of get to like the final set piece, like when it just becomes like a wonky CG palooza, that's where I was like totally checked out. Like I could not care.
Whereas like, unlike you, with Spider-Man No Way Home, I think that was like a blast the entire way. You know, I think it also suffered from some of the same special effects issues as Shang-Chi. Although I guess not as badly. I didn't notice the special effects being as bad in Spider-Man as I did in Shang-Chi and Doctor Strange, by the way, which we should get into soon.
I think Shang-Chi had more of like the last act had issues with CG. The whole thing with Spider-Man is that it just looked like it was made in a tube, which it was because it was made in the studios during the pandemic. But like, it always felt like it was artificial to me in a way that like at least Shang-Chi, when we spent some time in like San Francisco at the beginning and stuff, had some like life to it. I felt like I know that bus scene was also filmed in a studio, but it felt a little bit more vibrant to me than anything in Spider-Man No Way Home. But I know I'm the unpopular opinion on that.
Yeah. I think the reason why, like, because if I had to just hold the action up, I would say that like you're going to get better action in Shang-Chi. You're going to get like 3 or 4 scenes. You know, like that opening prologue scene, you're going to get the bus scene. You're getting a lot of really good like action, choreography, and everything like that compared to Spider-Man No Way Home. But I think that the character of Spider-Man, the villains of Spider-Man, and like just the whole fun of it, like the whole like journey and where the story goes, like all of that, I think is way more fun and exciting of a movie. And I think that Tom Holland is like so fun to watch. Whereas with Shang-Chi, I just didn't love the characters as much. I just was very like, I don't know, like I don't think it reminds me of like Captain Marvel. Or like my favorite things about Captain Marvel had very, very little to do with the character of Captain Marvel because she was just kind of like showing too much emotions, we guess. like I don't know, that character I don't think had a lot of energy, but yeah.
I mean, I would say that with Spider-Man, I do think the third act is pretty easily the best of that film, and some of it almost redeems the film for me, but not enough. Not enough. But that's fine because we're going to talk about Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness.
In the Multiverse of Madness, not to be confused with John Carpenter's In the Mouth of Madness. I love the play on the title. As soon as I saw them announce that, I was like, okay. And Sam Raimi's directing this. Let's go. Let's do it. This is the second Doctor Strange movie. It kind of is a sequel to the first Doctor Strange, or at least it's trying to be. It's sort of like continuing some of the story threads, 1 or 2 of the story threads at least, maybe 3 from the first Doctor Strange, like Christine Palmer, played by Rachel McAdams, is back. We have, we're still kind of playing around with like Wong as the Sorcerer Supreme instead of Stephen Strange. We also have Baron Mordo, played by Chiwetel Ejiofor, coming back in here. His whole thing from that movie kind of continues. I think that they've mostly abandoned though their plans for like doing full on Doctor Strange with Baron Mordo, any of that stuff. We'll see. But yeah, it is kind of a sequel to that movie. But really, this is like the next kind of like event Marvel film. It's not an Avengers film, but it's kind of doing what Captain America Civil War did to an extent, where it's sort of using the marquee character to bring in sort of a crossover. So Captain America Civil War had a lot of other heroes, like a lot of other Avengers kind of coming in there, but it was supposed to really be a Captain America movie. This is like halfway in between. It's like halfway between like a real sequel and like a Captain America Civil War sequel, if that makes sense, because you don't have like a ton of like Marvel characters coming in for the majority of this movie. You kind of have some stuff toward the end, which we won't get into, but really, like, this is like Doctor Strange and Scarlet Witch. It's not Ant-Man and the Wasp, it's Doctor Strange and Scarlet Witch. That's this movie. I'm gonna say off the bat that we're gonna do our best not to spoil things. We're gonna do our best to kind of keep this thing a little bit spoiler free.
Sure.
But we might say some things. I haven't seen the trailer still, so I'll let you make decisions. Like if there's stuff that shows up in the trailer, maybe you can give something away there, because
I guess so.
I don't know.
I still don't really get why you're so amped to see this trailer. I think it's just a fine trailer, but you're like, you were more excited to see the trailer than the movie, which I still don't get.
Because I was not, I think like I had a bad impression of like this movie going in. I had a little bit of like, based on like what I'm hearing about what this movie's going to be. And like, I got spoiled. Like, I didn't see the trailer, but I got spoiled on like the big cameo from the trailer. And I was like, I was nervous because I think I don't really like all this multiverse stuff. I really don't. Like, I think Marvel going the multiverse route, especially after watching this movie, I think it's just not working for me. No. I guess it's working for other people, but can I, right off the bat, can I just say, when you do the multiverse thing, here's the problem.
Sure. Yeah, I was going to say, could you elaborate on this? Okay,
Nothing
that's
matters.
why I figured that you were going to suggest. Yeah, because
right?
That's the tricky thing, is that it's really hard to establish stakes in a multiverse.
Yes,
because you can just kind of just be like, well, that doesn't exist. That doesn't count. Like, that didn't exist.
That character
was another
died.
World.
Whatever.
Right.
They can just bring that character back from another universe. And I think What If started to worry me the most about this. I think Loki, it didn't really go all the way with it, because it just sort of slowly introduced that possibilities. I think in a fun way. But then with What If, that's when we started to be like, okay, this is just giving Marvel permission to do anything. And I think that like when you take some of those limitations away, you get something really out of control. And so that's my big criticism with this movie, with multiverses in general. And I'm very nervous about this creative decision. But I guess, did you have a thought on that before we go through the plot?
I mean,
synopsis?
I get why they're going in this route. I mean, it makes sense. Not only as far as like creatively, they've gotten so big that's like, where can they really go? But like all other universes, like they expanded their own universe so far. That's like, what's the next step? The multiverse. It makes sense. Also, it's like coming off of Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, which was such a huge hit and basically outshined any of the MCU movies, I would say, with maybe the exception of Black Panther in 2018. Any recent Marvel movie has been overshadowed creatively, and in terms of just being like a really solid, good film with that film. And I feel like Marvel's maybe a little bitter about that. I'm sure like this was in the plan before that, but like it feels like, I don't know, I still get the vibe from No Way Home that they're like kind of bitter that Spider-Verse kind of beat them to the punch in that respect. But I also just think like, yeah, I mean, I think multiverse also offers the possibility of like, you can do stuff like Venom can technically get into this universe because like he's from another universe, and like theoretically you could like include the X-Men from the original X-Men movies. Like you could bring Hugh Jackman back if you wanted to, not that he's in this movie, but like theoretically you could, and you could do all these other things. And maybe if the time came, like I don't even know if they're even thinking about including like the DC canon, but theoretically there's like a multiverse like that, I guess could happen. I don't know. I mean, it's not like out of the depths of possibility, I guess, at this point, but it's not likely to happen, to be sure. But I mean, creatively speaking, yeah, it is like, or sorry, at least corporately speaking, it is, it makes sense why they're going this direction. Now, creatively speaking, that's where it gets a little bit tricky. Like, is there a way you can really ground the movie enough to have like palatable stakes? Can you like even make a film with all the baggage that's going to be thrown into these things? And it feels like the wear and tear of Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness suggests that this might be getting close to the actual breaking point of where these movies can really go at this point.
I have to agree, because this is getting way too complicated. It really is. Because for example, if I was going to do like an X-Men thing in the MCU, I do not want them to just take references and just be like, all right, we'll just take the X-Men stuff and that's it. That's the big thing. And it's like, no, I mean, I think what's been more key to Marvel's success with a lot of people has been build your own thing and like kind of create it from the ground up, put the work in, make us care. Like that, I think, is what's going by the wayside the more and more I'm seeing this multiverse thing taking shape. And so that's the thing. Like, I think that we're going to get fewer things like Guardians of the Galaxy where they're taking more risks. They're trying to like build new sort of like build new franchises within their mega franchise that are good on the merits, not just good because you remember it. And I think this movie scares me. People are like, this is a scary movie because no, it scares me for other reasons. Yeah.
I mean, personally speaking, I feel like I've been kind of checked out with MCU after Endgame. Like Endgame, not a film that I like love, but I think it is better than I ultimately expected. And I think it does have a sense of finality to it, to where it's like, okay, like, well, then why are we really going back? Like, I know like they can't end it with Endgame because it's a huge cash cow and they're going to run this thing as fast as they can go. But it's like, well, what's going to justify keep coming back? And it seems like the multiverse thing is really where they're pushing that, because it's like, that's like, it can just expand this universe in so many big ways. But it's like, just because you can doesn't mean you should. I mean, I get like they want to do this, and it's like it's easy to see the appeal of it, and certainly like from a box office standpoint, it's like, well, theoretically, if we can include this person, like, would that, you know, entice you? Would that make you feel like we're doing something you haven't seen before? And yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's really tricky, and I feel like Phase 4 has easily been the weakest Marvel or MCU phase, just because it hasn't really answered that core question, I think, of like, what can we really do to justify continuing the MCU after Endgame?
I think, yeah, I have to agree. But I think for me, where I come at it slightly differently is because, well, I mean, where I come from at it basically the same is that, yeah, with the Endgame, I was just sort of like, I don't need more. I'm good. I think I've looked at the rest of this stuff. Like, I don't get sad at the idea of the MCU just kind of like fizzling out, because I thought Endgame was so good that it's like, okay, you know, that it has happened eventually. And I think that to me is like the great place of like, this was where the MCU kind of died and kind of finished. But I've been sort of surprised in a good way by like they've been almost doing like these fun little epilogue stories that I've enjoyed. I enjoyed WandaVision and Loki as fun epilogues, you know, like little extra stories. The Spider-Man movies have been like that for me, and these other kind of things where you just sense that they're trying to build new stuff without, you know, doing the same level of work, trying to build Shang-Chi, trying to do a new Black Widow, trying to do Eternals, and yeah, it's just, to me, it's feeling a little bit like I guess I care a little bit less than maybe some other people do. But I know a lot of people are very different from us, and they are still they are still fully into this universe, and it doesn't matter what we say. So power to them. You know, I think that,
I mean,
you know,
yeah, I mean, for me, the hope would be like, you know, I think Eternals in theory was good, because it's like, okay, what if we had like a prestige director kind of have her add her stamp to something like this that has been so producer driven over the years? Like, they've tried occasionally to include more of a directorial influence in like fits and starts. Certainly, I think Guardians of the Galaxy is one of the better examples. Black Panther is one of the better examples.
But then with Ant-Man, you know, they fired Edgar Wright, so they lost him. And then with you really, their big successes have been like the Russo brothers, and those are like TV guys. Those are guys who came in and they're hiring a lot of like journeyman directors to kind of come in, and they're not all bad. Like Peyton Reed's a fine director. Sure. And Joe Johnson, but like at least with the Russo brothers, I think that they weren't just journeymen. I think that they were interesting because they were the community guys. They were guys who were like super, like they love genre. They love playing with genre. They're kind of like this. I think they're fun weirdos in terms of like how their style meshed with the Marvel formula, and I think that is slightly different. But then Captain Marvel, you have Anna Boden and Ryan Fleck, who had basically no stamp whatsoever on that movie, right? Oh,
well, I would disagree, because I wrote a piece about this at cinemaholics.com, but I get what you mean in theory. Yeah.
I disagree. I think that like, yeah, they just got steamrolled with Captain Marvel.
Sure. I think the issue was that like, I think they couldn't really define themselves as much, because they didn't have the action expertise, so it's like they kind of let like the VFX and the second
even
unit
outside
teams
of that
to do
stuff,
that.
I think that those are both directors who are much better at writing characters and writing story than what we really got with Captain Marvel. Like I was saying before, I think that is a story arc that is just so amateur, and that tells me that those directors did not have that much input on how everything came about, and it was like ruled by the VFX.
I mean, I think that issue was more prominent for me in Black Widow, which is a film that's like trying to tackle like very serious stuff. Like Kate Shortland was like trying to kind of incorporate some heavier, moodier stakes into that, like something a little bit more gritty and pronounced. But because it's like the MCU and because she doesn't really have like the action experience, it like felt like there was like a real give and pull in that film between like something like, you know, a little bit more mature and thoughtful and character based versus like the MCU formula, which was so counteractive to that. I felt like that was way more detrimental film for that reason than Captain Marvel, but I think they have similar problems in that respect.
I don't know. I think Black Widow at least has some fun stuff in it, kind of like Shang-Chi. Like there's stuff in that movie that I think that they kind of nailed, but whatever.
Sure, that's what I feel about Captain Marvel, so we can agree to disagree.
There we go. We go. Yeah. So I guess we've been trying not. It's like it's like we don't want to talk about Doctor Strange and Multiverse of Madness.
Oh, I'd be happy to. I mean,
let's do it. Directed by Sam Raimi, written by Michael Waldron. This had extensive reshoots. I mean, they kind of had to rework this thing because it was originally supposed to come out before Spider-Man No Way Home. I believe the character America Chavez in this movie, who I forget the actor's name, Xochitl Gomez, she was supposed to be like in Spider-Man No Way Home, apparently, kind of doing what the Ned character does in that movie in terms of like the magic and stuff. But they kind of had to retool it. They kind of had to be like, actually, no, Doctor Strange is going to come out after. Because I think the original release date for this was like it was 2021. And I think it was like early 2021 or maybe late 2021. I can't remember. That said, I think that this movie kind of from the get-go had me in terms of like, oh, this is fun because it kind of starts in media res. We kind of have Doctor Strange like running around like a different version of Doctor Strange. We have the America Chavez character. We have a plot where basically she can go like between the multiverses. And I was like, that's cool. They're just kind of like diving into it, right? But then we sort of get into like, okay, Doctor Strange has to go to Christine's wedding. And they try to do this thing where, hey, remember Rachel McAdams in this movie? Like it was in these movies. Apparently she's really, really important to Doctor Strange. Apparently their love story is like this really tragic one that you should feel sad about.
Yeah.
And you know what was indicative of how forced that felt? What? Literally, Will, when we were in the screening, I was with my partner and she looked up and she was just like, wait, Rachel McAdams is in these movies?
Yeah. Well, that's what I felt about Chiwetel Ejiofor, which I rewatched the first one. I was like, well, it's kind of good I did because I had totally forgotten Chiwetel Ejiofor was in that first Doctor Strange film. And it feels like a lot of their like conflict happened off camera. Like there's like an end credits teaser where he's like, oh yeah, I'm threatening to be bad. But then like it feels like there was like a second Doctor Strange film
again.
Right. But it felt like there was like a second Doctor Strange film, like its own like Dark World sequel. It just like didn't happen or like happened off camera. Right. And it's like we're like, and this feels like it's like kind of like a belated like third chapter, even though it's technically a sequel to
Doctor Strange Civil War.
Right.
Because Doctor Strange at one point in this movie is sort of like, oh yeah, he and I are like arch rivals or whatever, or arch nemesis. Right. And I'm like, how do you know? Because like apparently all that stuff already happened. We didn't see it.
And it's also like the whole idea of the film is more like, is Doctor Strange happy with like what he did? And it's kind of like more about like he's made the choice to be Doctor Strange, but at the sacrifice of you know having a foundational life, his personal life, and all this stuff. And it's like, was this really the right choice? And Wanda Scarlet Witch was like kind of, she's in like a similar position where it's like she wants to have that like personal life that she was kind of unable to have due to being Scarlet Witch, and it's like she's like trying to like scour the multiverse to kind of make this world for herself. And it's I mean like certainly that's like it's this weird thing where it's like it feels like we're missing a Doctor Strange sequel, and there's this other like thing happened that all like on the small screen, which is fine, I guess. But it's like, for a movie, it kind of feels like we're stretching the rubber band a little bit, because it's like there's like all this stuff that needs to be established, then all this exposition needs to be dumped in the process, and it just becomes it definitely has some wear and tear on it.
Here's the thing, though, Will, because I feel like, because I was going to ask you about this. This movie definitely, it's a sequel to WandaVision. I'd say it's more of a sequel to WandaVision than it is a sequel to Doctor Strange, the first one. It's because this movie cares way more about Scarlet Witch and her troubles and like all that stuff than it does like Doctor Strange's whole, like, we get offhand stuff about Doctor Strange. It's like such a minute part of the movie. It's like the thing with the watch. It's like, I just feel so slapdash compared to, we get heavy emotional moments with Scarlet Witch. We get like really just like horrific sequences with her character. So I was curious though, because you didn't watch WandaVision. How were you able to connect the dots here? Did it throw you off, or how'd it go?
No. Not really. I mean, I just asked my friends. I was like, what do I need to know about WandaVision before I go into this? And they just basically said, she's grieving the loss of Vision. She had kids in the world she created. She enslaved the town. She wants to have those kids back. And I was like, oh, that's all I need to know. So I went into this knowing what I felt I needed to know.
That might actually have made you more favorable then, because I think there's a gap between WandaVision and this movie that is like super indefensible. Because if you had watched WandaVision, if you read the synopsis, you might be of like, I'm going to say something here that's like kind of minor spoilery. It gets brought up in like the first act. Okay. So it's not like a third act kind of thing, but in the first act, we find out like Scarlet Witch is essentially the villain of this movie, right? Which I didn't know they were really doing. Like I didn't watch the trailer, so I don't know if this trailer gives that away or whatever. But
basically, it would be hard to watch a trailer and not get that takeaway. Like, okay, you'd have to be like dense, I think, to not feel like that's where it's going.
Right. So here's the thing: WandaVision, the whole thing with that is that she enslaves the town, right? But then she sacrifices like those kids, like she loses those kids in order to free the people of the town. And there's even this like super cringe moment where like Photon, played by Teyonah Parris, is like, they'll never know what you did for them. And it's like trying to hail Wanda up as this hero. But then the show kind of ends where she has that Darkhold thing and she's like trying to get the kids back. There's a huge gap there, because then we go from that Wanda to the Wanda of this movie, which is such a drastic departure. And like, I get it. They're trying to say that the Darkhold kind of like corrupted her, but that is so weak. That is such a weak storytelling move, because how do you go from she's willing to sacrifice her kids to free a bunch of people she enslaved to what she does in this movie, and like just trying to wave that away with like a book made her do it, is so like, that to me is not like the better. I think Marvel's much better than that. It just is. Like, it has been. Like, that is such weak characterization. I do not understand how they messed that up so badly. It tells me that they rushed this thing, that like they are struggling to like really connect these things in a way that makes sense. And so that to me is probably my biggest criticism, is that I think they do I think the Scarlet Witch we get in this movie is fun. And I think there's like really cool stuff in here, really good horror stuff in here. But when it comes to like character, this movie just like whiffs. So that's my main criticism of this movie. And also, I was tired. It was too long. It felt long, and I was not into this movie. Sorry.
So I will say, I mean, I walked out of this being like, I'm so glad I didn't watch WandaVision. I felt good. I was like, I did the good thing. I did the right thing, I think. So I don't know. I mean, I felt great about that personally. But
WandaVision is good, though. I like WandaVision a lot.
Well, I'll never know. Probably. I'm glad you got something out of it. I'm glad everyone else that liked it got something out of it. I'll never know what it's like, probably. But I mean, I will say I certainly came out of this maybe not overwhelmingly more positive than you, but certainly much more positive than you seem to be. You're very down on this film, and it's kind of uncharacteristic of me to be like, yeah, let's prop up the Marvel movie, considering how down I've been on all the recent ones. But I think this is probably my favorite of the Phase 4 films, mainly because, to my surprise, it is more of a Sam Raimi film than I expected going into this, even down to, like you said, that kind of like quality where it feels like it could like fall apart at any moment. That feels very true to me to like the original Evil Dead, where it is like a man out of his element fighting supernatural entities, an evil witch, and an evil book. It's like, it makes sense to me on like a paper, like on paper, it makes sense to me why Kevin Feige, when they lost Scott Derrickson, was like, let's just get Sam Raimi. Why not? And like, it's like the core idea is like fundamentally Sam Raimi, but it also makes sense to me that like, if it wasn't someone like experienced like Sam Raimi, someone who has worked the blockbuster system, an actual genre filmmaker, I feel like this movie would not work for me at all. And I don't think it would have worked in general, but having him involved and giving him enough freedom to make a Sam Raimi movie, even with all the Marvel stuff that's thrown into it, I think makes it work far better than it would have under most other circumstances.
I think so. Here's the thing. I love Sam Raimi. Yeah, the listeners know this. I love Evil Dead. I love Army of Darkness. I even went to bat for Oz the Great and Powerful. Not a good movie, but I showed up. I was in the theater. I saw it. His last movie that he made, by the way, almost a decade ago.
9 years ago.
Been a long time. And he's always been a director that I super respect, and I love most of his movies. So, yeah, and I know you go to bat for Spider-Man 3, you know, come hell or high water. With this movie, there is a super fun, awesome Sam Raimi movie in this. There is. There are moments in this movie where like, yeah, I'll take, you know, Demon Cape over anything we got in Black Widow or Shang-Chi or Eternals. I think though, I just can't get past how the really cool Sam Raimi movie has to suffer alongside the extremely pedantic and pedestrian Marvel mishmash trash movie where it's just searching for a book we don't care about because another book we don't care about. And they're like, we have all these multiverses. It's madness. We go to one multiverse, basically. One. And then we go to another one. And then it's kind of cool, but we're barely there. And then the multiverse we go to and the characters we get, there's something that happens like with a bunch of Marvel stuff, a bunch of MCU stuff. And I just thought it was so forced. It was so like, you know, and I'm not going to give anything away here, but I had that moment, I think, that a lot of people must have had a lot earlier with these Marvel movies, where I was just like, oh my gosh, like, can we just stop? Like, this is just, and like, especially when like the crowd starts cheering and it's very muted, you know, it was just like 10 people just like trying to carry the rest of the audience and clapping and everything. And I'm just like, what are you clapping for?
Oh yeah.
Like, what is this to you? Like, I don't get it.
For the like cameo scene, like cameo the scene that happens midway through the movie. There was like people in my audience who were like, it didn't feel like they were actually excited about the cameos in question. It just felt like they were clapping because like, I need people to know I know these people. I need people to know like that I know these people. I know them.
Right. It's like the red letter media. Like, I clapped. I saw the
thing. I clapped. I saw the thing I knew when I clapped. Yeah, it's like trains. There's trained seals at this point. I'm sorry.
Well, no, I don't want to be hard. Yeah. I don't think there's anything wrong with having enthusiasm and having fun. And like, I just have to point out that I'm just not that person. I'm not fun, I guess. I don't get the same thing out of it that those people do. I'm glad they do. I'm glad it makes people happy. Like, I'm not looking down on anybody, but that's not to me lasting power.
I mean, you know, in their defense, I got very giddy when Bruce Campbell showed up, which is, you know, a trademark of a Sam Raimi film.
He had to be there. Yeah. He was one of the best parts of the movie.
I didn't see the Oldsmobile. Did you see that? His car?
No.
I never. Yeah, I was looking for it. I didn't see it, unfortunately. But I know that's like always there. Like there are trademarks of Raimi stuff, like his little cameos.
Oh yeah, I mean they're direct. There's direct like imagery, direct references. There's tons of like Sam Raimi stuff in this.
Sure, yeah, and you know I got excited for those moments. So maybe I'm a hypocrite for making fun of.
But
these
I'm not going to shout and clap when I see a hand bursting from the ground. Like I mean I guess that's the difference. I'm just gonna be like, nice, you know.
Yeah, I don't know. I smile and I perk up on my seat. I'm like, all right. You know,
I think the thing that just irks me is just like here's a character. It's just like the presence of a character makes people like, yes, we're gonna get movies now with that, and I'm just like,
well, yeah. Okay. I mean, what bugs me is that Marvel knows that they have these things, and they pause the film to be like, 3 seconds or like 30 seconds are like cold on their face, and people are like, I have to clap now. It's like they know this is gonna happen. If it was a genuine response, like if for whatever reason they like didn't know that a certain famous, long-standing X-Men character showed up in this movie, and they were like genuinely like shocked, and it was like, I don't know how to feel about this. I need to like clap. Like that would be one thing, but I feel like that is not the case. Like I feel like there's like, okay, this is the moment where I clap. We're all gonna do it. We got to do it.
It's the same thing that hasn't aged well, like Force Awakens, where like the chessboard shows up on the Millennium Falcon and people lost their minds. And I remember sitting there and just being like, it's just the chess thing from the first Star Wars. Like, I there's something that some people want from movies I don't understand. Like, I just don't want myself. I don't understand it.
And for me, I found that to be way more grating about Spider-Man: No Way Home, because that's like whole movie.
I thought Spider-Man did a better job with it. I pushed back there a little bit.
I think they did it way worse. I think they did it way worse because this movie they at least like designated to one scene. In this movie, they designated to like one scene. It's like, okay, get out of the system, and then the scene after that, Raimi's like, okay, I let you have your cake. Let me have my thing, and then that made it fun. Because like Raimi got to do his thing.
Spider-Man is that in No Way Home is that like the actors are so charismatic and they're having so much fun doing it that even if you don't know the references, the performances are what save it for me.
There are only 2 actors, I would argue, in that movie that return. They're really having fun with it. Everyone else just seems checked out and like for the paycheck. As far as like the returning cameos,
I feel like Tobey Maguire is just kind of like, hey.
Okay, so we can talk about. I guess it's the restrictions are off for spoilers.
I think with Spider-Man: No Way Home, I think that ship sailed a long time ago.
I mean, with Willem Dafoe and Andrew Garfield, like I think they're in it, and I think they commit, and I think their performances actually elevate the film. As far as just being like gimmicky cameos, actually giving like thoughtful performances that like actually better in like Garfield's case, it like betters his films because it gives like an arc that wasn't in that second film.
Yeah.
And then with Willem Dafoe, it's like, okay, like it's clear like he's like one of our great actors.
Yeah.
And he's like having fun. And it's like, okay, like I think my issue with that is that it's relying so heavily on the build up from those, like it's cripping Sam Raimi's films to like add stakes. And to me, that's just cynical. Like I feel like at least with this movie, it's just like,
I guess I'm nowhere near as cynical on that move because I think that they did it. At least they do a good job with it. If they did a bad job with it, I'd be right there with you. But
I guess we just gotta disagree then as far as like, I thought they did a bad job personally. I think the last act of that's fine when it actually gets to be Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire, like, and Tom Holland actually pounding around. That's like, those are the best scenes outside of Willem Dafoe's performance in that film for me. But I just felt like that movie relied so heavily on like the goodwill established from the fans from other films without really doing the work itself to be a well-rounded film that I don't know. I found it to be a way more depressing and cringy film than this film. But it seems like you just had those feelings that I had for Spider-Man with this film.
Yeah, we have like inverted opinions here. So maybe the listeners are going to like be similarly divided. Some are going to be on your side, some on my side. I don't know.
It's a real multiverse of madness going on here, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, and I would say, like I was watching Dan Merle's review of this movie, and he said something that I think applies to that cringe factor. That's sort of like, Marvel's forcing this. They're trying so hard. He mentioned he had the same kind of reaction, and I did too, to an extent, like with the America Chavez character played by Xochitl Gomez, who I thought the actor, did a fine job. I thought the character was extremely lackluster. Like the character,
I think it was very underwritten.
Very underwritten.
Probably, like
exactly.
you said, the product of the reshoots, kind of this like conflicting. But I think that's probably the biggest problem with this film is that her character is severely underserviced.
She gets a couple of moments where I was just like, okay, now this character is interesting. Like she's like showing Doctor Strange the ropes of the multiverse, and like they're having a little bit of a back and forth. You can tell that they're trying to make her the next kind of like, Tony Stark and Tom Holland kind of like mentor protege sort of thing. And I was like, okay, you can do that. Sure. I mean, Doctor Strange was basically Robert, the Tony Stark character anyway. Cause I think like Iron Man essentially was like the comics version of Iron Man is very different from how Robert Downey Jr. did it. Robert Downey Jr. kind of took like the snarky sarcasm of Doctor Strange from the comics. So it makes sense that they would transition into letting the Doctor Strange kind of fill that role a little bit more, but they can't have Tom Holland be in that anymore. So they kind of make this new character. I think what I was referencing before, the whole thing where they are trying to like basically be like, check it out. She's wearing a pride flag on her jacket. Like, check it out. She has 2 moms. We did something special. We pandered. I mean, I think there was something there where it was just like, there's a way to do it where it's like, yeah, it's great, like, you know, being able to like bring in, you know, more representation. The way Marvel did it in that scene of just like, see, look,
That scene,
that reminds me of like the cameo stuff. I'm just like, oh my gosh, like, be more cool, be more chill when you do these things. Like, it's not that you can do these things, just, I don't know, they're just raising so much attention to it.
That scene though is funny because it's just like she just like steps on a thing. It's like, oh, time for my exposition, my backstory. I guess we're gonna do this now. It's just like kind of this.
That whole
just
thing
like,
is like, here's like a memory thing. Like,
right.
What is this?
Right. Yeah. It's just like,
I mean, just
time for this. Yeah. Yeah. It was funny to me. It's as far as like kind of like how lazily it was just like, oh yeah, I guess we're just gonna do this now. Why not?
Right. And then he does it too, and it's like the most. It's ridiculous. And it's like, yes, Christine Palmer, she's the linchpin of the Marvel universe. They did a similar thing with What If, actually, because in What If they have a whole episode of like, oh, what if Christine Palmer had died in the car accident and Doctor Strange had lost her, he would become evil Doctor Strange. And I was kind of, I remember being like, he cared about her that much? Because if you watch that first Doctor Strange movie, he's very mean to her. And like, they are not that close. I mean, I don't know. They seem just sort of like they were sort of romantic coworkers once. Now they're just kind of like, they care about each other, but like, yeah.
That's why I feel like it needed its own, like, it feels like there's like a Dark World sequel that just like didn't happen. Like that's like kind of like Dark World, like Thor like has like issues with Loki and then like has like relationship trouble with Natalie Portman's Jane character, and it felt like there was like kind of like a sequel like that with Doctor Strange that just like we didn't see. Like he had like a similar situation with Chiwetel Ejiofor and Rachel McAdams, and it just felt like, okay, like, well, if you don't show us that stuff, I mean, I'll just have to assume it happened. But you know, like it's kind of hard to establish emotional stakes for the character if we just don't really know this stuff and just assume it happened.
We should talk about Scarlet Witch. I mean, we've been talking a lot, but I think that like some of the best stuff in this movie have to do with Wanda and Scarlet Witch. Some of the worst things in this movie have to do with Scarlet Witch. I find her motivation in this movie to be super inconsistent and messy. Like, I kind of mentioned it before, the whole thing with the book, and then it is playing into that trope, you know, of like mothers becoming monsters. And I think that like there's a way to do that for sure. Like, I'm not saying like you can't have that in a movie, but it's a trope for a reason. And there was something about like the lengths she was going to go to like steal kids. And I don't know, there was something kind of icky about it, I thought. I mean, they kind of play it up with the whole like she's evil. She does things that are horrific, and I thought she was one of the few characters in this who I was like, whenever she was on screen, I was like, okay, good. This is going to be a part of the movie that I enjoy probably, because I don't know. I just feel like Elizabeth Olsen is just kind of having fun. She's kind of like kicking it up and trying to be a little bit extra with it. Whereas with Doctor Strange in this, he's okay. I feel like people just don't talk about the Benedict Cumberbatch performance in these movies as much, because I just feel like sometimes it's very sleepy. I think my favorite Doctor Strange that we've ever gotten, there are two, like part of Spider-Man No Way Home, where he's just kind of he's just like goofing, you know, not taking it seriously. I liked that mode where he's like wearing the winter jacket and he's like, I'm Doctor Strange. What are you going to do? And then also the kind of Infinity War Doctor Strange, who he's a jackass. Like, he's just like, yeah, when he and Tony Stark just don't get along, that to me is like, that's interesting. That's like a Doctor Strange that I think has a bit of a spark to him. The way he fights Thanos, and I'm like, this is cool. This is Doctor Strange to me. But in this movie, it's just a lot of him running around and him just being like, we got to do this. We got to go here. We got to go. And I don't know, that Doctor Strange I thought was just very like placid. And I don't know. I didn't think it was a great performance, but I don't know if I'm alone in that.
I don't think it's like his best work or anything. I think he's just kind of fine in the role. I agree. I think the only time his performance really stood out to me to date was probably in Infinity War, just because that's probably the one where he was given the most to do outside of No Way Home and his own movie. But I like I said before, I like that in this movie they just kind of designate him to be the Ash Williams character, like the guy in the first Evil Dead who's just kind of just like caught in the whirlwind of this perpetual cycle of madness. And like I said, I do wish there was more actual shenanigans with the multiverse. Like, there's like one scene we basically get where it's like, okay, like, well, you showed us all this stuff. Why don't we just go back to one of those ones? Those all seem fun.
They seem way more fun.
Right.
There was another thing too, because like the multiverse we end up in, it's very inconsistent because we're supposed to believe. Okay, so I guess this is going to be like sort of a not a big spoiler or anything, but I am going to kind of describe this main multiverse a little bit. But basically, we have a version of Wanda in this multiverse that is basically the Westview version, where it's like the house and everything, and it looks just like WandaVision, the clothes. But then the rest of this multiverse is totally different from that. And that made no sense to me at all, because she's like showing up, she has the powers of Wanda. And I'm like, well, did Westview happen here too? How does she have kids? Like, where do those kids come from? Like, why does this Wanda exist? And stuff like that. I was just like, this feels like they probably thought it through, but they were just like, nobody's going to notice that, right? And maybe that's the case. Maybe no one's going to care except for me.
I don't know. I think there's enough information given there that I didn't really concern myself much about it. But I think the reason why I'm more favorable on this film than you is just because I wasn't really looking at it through the lens of like, how does this fit into the Marvel Cinematic Universe? How does it connect to these characters? I'm looking at it purely as a Sam Raimi film, just like, okay, what is Sam Raimi actually adding to the film? My concern going into it was like, okay, like Sam Raimi's a director for hire, a gun for hire here, just kind of doing what's expected of him. There'll be like one or two scenes where we kind of get the Raimi-ness of it, and that'll be it. And I think broadly speaking, it's more of a Raimi film than I anticipated. So that kind of added to my elation. Certainly, I think, as we've suggested, the last act or so feels like it's most inspired by his style. There's like a musical fight that I think is just pure bliss. There's cool. A character that's introduced in the beginning that we kind of like get connected to at the end, where it's like, okay, now we're talking. Yeah. And it's like, that's fun. But I think even throughout the film, there is a lot of Raimi-ness. Like I said, the core story is like true to what we expect from the early Sam Raimi. I think even something like the Kanju fight at the beginning of the film, where we see like, you know, the reaction shots from people, we see the brighter color palette, we see like the wacky facial expressions from the monster and Doctor Strange, we see like the whooshing camera when the cape comes to save America, we get like the plucking sound when something very violent happens, and it's like, okay, like, you know, it's like fits and starts, but we are seeing Sam Raimi and there's like overlays like during like a exposition scene. There's like the Dutch angles throughout the film. There are like fun transition scenes. Like there are like maybe superficial things, but there are like things throughout the film that, okay, like clearly Sam Raimi got to influence the story. It's not just like kind of a yes man for Kevin Feige. But yeah, I mean, part of that is me, like you said, like it's been 10 years almost since we've gotten a Sam Raimi directed film. And it's been longer than that since we've gotten like a true blue Sam Raimi film with Drag Me to Hell. So part of me is just like getting in my Cheetos bag and just trying to get the dust of Sam Raimi into my mouth and being like, there's still Cheetos in here. There's still Cheetos. But but it is, I do think those directorial influences just make a better experience for me than what we've gotten from the last few Marvel movies, where like we either get something like Shang-Chi or No Way Home or like Black Widow, where it's like you can kind of see some of the directorial influence, but it mostly just feels like a Marvel film, or we get Eternals where it's like, this is a Chloe Zhao film, but it's a mess. And this is like, it's a mess, but it is still a Sam Raimi film. It's more enjoyable because he's a genre filmmaker and he has fun with these characters. And he knows what he's doing here, as opposed to, I think, Chloe Zhao, who just kind of felt like in the weeds a bit. Like it just felt like she didn't really know what she was ultimately going to do with these characters. And it's unfortunate. But I mean, like I said, it's a mixed bag. It's like it's more average than good in my opinion, but it felt refreshing to me at a time when I was pretty checked out with the MCU. So for that, I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I honestly, I don't disagree with you much there. I honestly, most of what you said, I'm like, yeah, you know, I think I just sort of like come out of like the outcome for me. I feel a little bit more soured on it, especially as time has gone by. I'd say that, yeah, like he hasn't been on the movie scene much, but you know, he did work on Ash versus Evil Dead, the show, you know, so
the pilot for that is fantastic. I mean, I need to catch up on that show. The first season's fun, but yeah, he did great work in the pilot.
Yeah, I mean, it's 3 seasons, I think they did for that, I want to say. And I never got into it, but I heard it was really, really fun. So I'm a little bit cynical at this point about the MCU in general. I'm hoping that Thor Love and Thunder, you know, because I loved Thor Ragnarok, and I haven't seen the trailer, but I heard the trailer is pretty fun. And, you know, who knows what's going to happen to that Black Panther Wakanda Forever movie. I have no idea what they're doing there. But hey, we're getting that this year too. So
yeah,
there's reason to feel okay.
Yeah. Right. We're just in a weird position where, like, I think all the stuff you're feeling was how I felt getting out of Spider-Man No Way Home.
Yeah, you're trying to coach me. You're just like, John, just don't worry. We'll be okay.
I've lived this experience before. I'm your America Chavez. And like, you know, because I had that cynical experience with the last 2 to 4 Marvel films, I walked into this with low expectations, and I felt, you know, not like overwhelmed. Like, it's not like, oh man, this is like a return to form or anything, but you know, it's like, okay, this is a step up from what I've gotten I got more out of this one than what I had gotten out of the last few Phase 4 Marvel films. So, you know, not a ringing endorsement, certainly, but I mean, I'm just happy to see Sam back, really. That's what it comes down to. I'm just happy to see Sam Raimi back. I'll take what I can get. I love the guy. He's probably one of my favorite filmmakers, and to see him playing around with a $200 million budget, like, is this the best version of this? Certainly not. In another universe, I'm sure there's a far better version of this film. It probably starred Bruce Campbell in the 90s, but what can you do? But yeah, I mean, I think for what it is, it's fine. I think there's certainly a worse version that could have been out there to that extent.
Yeah, I definitely agree to you to quite an extent. I think it is really nice to just have an MCU movie directed by a filmmaker who actually got a lot of what he wanted into the movie. I think there are a lot of filmmakers, they've tried, like you said, Chloe Zhao, they tried to like put their own stamp on it. They try to do things, but I think similarly to Chloe Zhao to some extent, like, he's working around the limitations, the constraints that I think the producers at Kevin Feige are probably putting on him. We don't know for sure, obviously. But yeah, I think he made the best out of a tricky spot he was put in as a director. And so I got to applaud him far more than I applaud a lot of the other people involved in this. But yeah, that's not to say that I don't think this is very much an enjoyable movie. I think it's enjoyable. I just, I had a hard time getting through it myself. Let's play the Rotten Tomatoes game though, Will, because I do want to talk about box office stuff, but first, let's see what the critics have to say about this one. We have a lot of critics who weighed in. We have 327 reviews counted so far. What do you think the Rotten Tomato score is as of the day we are recording?
So it seems like people are lower on it. It seems like folks are walking out of it disappointed when I'm pleasantly surprised. So I'm going to say, I don't think it's like overwhelmingly bad. I don't even think it's rotten. I think it's probably like a 78%.
You're in the zone. Not bad. 75%, which, yeah, that is a bit lower for one of these like kind of big Marvel movies, right? Usually the Marvel movies are in the 80s. So it's a little bit lower, right? But yeah, you're right. It's not like, oh, okay, it's terrible. This movie has its fans so far. What about audience score? We have 10,000 plus verified ratings. That's a lot. What do you think audiences are saying?
Well, that's a good question, because I feel like the audience response has been a little all over the place. But I think most people are fairly positive on it. I'm going to say 84%.
87%. You're also in the, you're only a few off. So, you know, very well done. I think that you're kind of, you know, you're getting close. Let's see if you can spot the cinema score. The folks in Vegas.
Okay. Oh, I gotta say I was spoiled on this one.
Because okay.
On Twitter, someone pointed out that I guess this is the lowest MCU cinema score, one of the lowest MCU cinema scores. So I think I heard it was like a B plus or a B.
It is a B plus, and that is the second worst MCU cinema score ever. Yeah, because usually the MCU films get like A plus, A minus. I think Eternals is still the lowest though. I think Eternals was oh gosh.
I thought they said Incredible Hulk was the lowest.
I don't know if they counted Incredible Hulk actually, because I think that one's probably low, but I don't remember off the top of my head. Actually, no, Incredible Hulk was A minus.
Oh wow! All right. I don't know why I heard that, but
yeah, that's strange. Eternals was a B though.
All right. Okay. Yeah, I was gonna say I knew it was like they're like, I don't know about this. I gotta really put on my critical hat and give this one a B.
I mean, that's the thing. Sometimes movies that people are like, this is terrible, get great cinema scores. I mean, I think one of the most famous examples is like Star Trek Into Darkness got like an A cinema score.
That's not terrible film in my opinion. But
not a terrible film, but it's certainly not one that has
people
people
hate that movie,
right?
For sure, yeah. But
so,
yeah, I mean, yeah,
it happens the other way around too.
Yeah, I mean, Marvel movies are very like fleeting, as we've suggested before. Like, I think they're very much like making you feel elated in the moment, and then afterwards you're just like, okay, I guess that was fine. And I feel like that plays typically into cinema score's favor, because they usually ask them like immediately after, right? It's not like they're like, we'll give you a week to think, process your thoughts. Like, it's like, sure. Yeah, so like with a Marvel movie, if they get like everything they want, like in No Way Home or whatever, it's just like, hey, that was what I wanted. That's what I wanted, and they can. Their criticisms will come later, but like in the moment, they're like pressing the button. They're like, "This is what I wanted." Yeah,
they're rolling the slot machine. A. All right, so we got to stop making fun of Las Vegas when we do this. All right, so letterbox rating.
I would say keep going, but I'm actually going to be flying through Las Vegas for a certain upcoming thing involving you. So I better not make some enemies while I'm down there. I might not have my kneecaps when I fly to California.
You like show up in the airport and there's like a crew of people with bats and they're the cinema score.
We heard what you said about the cinema score.
Yeah. All right. You took a real gamble coming out here. So Doctor Strange, the Multiverse of Madness on Letterboxd. We have 223,000 watches. What do you think the average rating is on Letterboxd right now?
I think it's somewhere between 3.2 and 3.4. So I'm going to say 3.3.
It's actually 3.5. A little bit higher. And yeah, I'm kind of looking at like, all right, what are friends of the show saying? And, most people I'm seeing on here are threes. I'm seeing threes. I'm seeing lots of twos. Kimber Myers gave it a 3, for example, friend of the show. Charlie Ridgely gave it 4, though. He was one of the highest I saw. And then, Ali Johnson gave it 2.5. And Chris Evangelista gave it 2.5. I'm seeing a bunch of 2.5s. Ryan Oliver gave it 2.5. I mean, yeah, not everybody was super into it. So it's quite an eclectic case. Oh, I see, Will Ashton, you did a review. The most maddening MCU entry maybe ever? Or no, is that's somebody else's? I clicked yours and it like followed to somebody else. No, this is yours. The best MCU movie in 3 years by default. All right.
That's true, in my opinion.
Could use more multiverse shenanigans. Okay.
I think I said that. Yeah, I think I said that in the review, in our actual audio review. I think.
You're if not consistent. Yeah. Box office wise, I mean, I don't think this is going to be the biggest domestic earner of the summer. I'm on record of I've been doing like the summer movie wager thing with a bunch of friends and coworkers, and a lot of people put Doctor Strange as number 1 in terms of like making the most domestically. Me and some others, we put Jurassic World Dominion. I think that's gonna make more.
You've really you're convinced now that Jurassic World is going to be number 1.
Because I know we talked about with Dan Merle, right, on the summer movie preview thing. I gave it more thought, and I think Dominion is going to be the one. I think Dominion is going to, I don't think it's going to be like a huge distance. I think Dominion is just going to have like more time, I guess. Not time like literal time, but I think that it's going to bring more people. I think Doctor Strange, this movie, is going to be a little bit limited because of the horror stuff. And I think it's going to have a really splashy couple of weeks. It's at 185 domestic now. I think it's going to finish up at around like 400. Whereas I think Dominion is probably going to make over 400 million. I
can see where you're coming from. I've thought about this myself. I think it's really going to come down to the quality of the film. If it's what people want and people really love it, like they did with that first Jurassic World, then I think it's going to absolutely be the highest grossing film of the summer. If it's a disappointment or people are like, I just didn't get it, I think it's going to be underperforming compared to Doctor Strange or Thor: The Dark World. It's hard to say. I don't know. I mean, it's really, I think, going to come down to quality for this one.
I think that's the case. Yeah, you're right. Because I just have a feeling, and again, I don't watch the trailers. I'm just sort of going off my gut. My gut is telling me that Dominion is going to do okay critically. It's probably going to be in the same zone, probably going to be in the 70s. And I think more people are going to be more interested because they haven't gotten a Jurassic Park movie in 4 years. And the last one was kind of like, the last one wasn't that great for a lot of people, but it had cool moments. And I think this is the one that I think this, as they're marketing it, is the bigger sequel to the first Jurassic World. And I think people are probably going to respond well to the marketing. And I do think that they are dumping a lot of money into the marketing for this. So I just have a feeling that's going to help it a lot. I also think, didn't we talk about this too? I think that a lot of people are going to be like, oh, I heard Doctor Strange 2 isn't that great. I'll just wait for it on Disney Plus. And I think there is a little bit of that going on there.
I mean, I think the thing that's really going to tip in Jurassic World's favor is that with a movie like in the summer box office, I think it really comes down to like, what are you going to give somebody that they have seen before, but also you have never seen before? And this, it's like, it's going to be the quote unquote like definitive final chapter of the Jurassic Park franchise, and it's the old cast getting to meet the new cast. And it's like, these are two things I know, but I haven't seen them interact together. But I think that comes down to how much do people really love these Jurassic World movies. I really don't know. I feel like people love the original Jurassic Park, which might certainly play in this movie's favor, but I don't know if they love the Jurassic World films enough to like
I think
push it to number one.
Those movies did well enough for that people. I think it's just people want something different than superheroes. I really do. I think that people are looking at it and being like, another Jurassic Park movie with even more stuff and more dinosaurs and characters from those movies that I like. And it's not Marvel, it's not DC. I think people really want that right now. And so I think that I think it's going to do a lot better.
Yeah.
The only thing that I think could like supersede that maybe is like, I won't be shocked if Lightyear ends up beating both of them. I wouldn't be shocked if Lightyear beats Doctor Strange, because I just have a feeling that this movie is going to have not as many legs to work with. I think Top Gun Mavericks, it's coming out in a couple of weeks, and I think that's gonna, come in and kind of take in some of that crowd that's old enough to appreciate Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, I want to say. So we'll have to see, though. Anything could happen.
Yeah, I mean, Top Gun Maverick got a really warm response from CinemaCon. They premiered it there.
I'm seeing it tomorrow.
Yeah.
I'm seeing Men on Wednesday. I can't wait for that.
Getting a lot of movies in this week.
Supporting my girl, Jessie Buck.
Yeah, I've heard, that movie I've heard all over the thing, all over the map.
I haven't heard anything about Men, so.
Okay.
Oh, but I know Men.
I bet you do.
Nice.
But yeah, I mean, I don't expect Top Gun to be like a top 5, but it could. I certainly think it's going to be like top 6 or 7.
Yeah. I think I ended up having it at number 6. Something like that. Maybe, because I think Minions I had at number 5. I have to double check.
That would be that's around where I'm at. Like, I feel like Minions is really going to be like a 4 or 5.
Yeah. I think because I had Thor Love and Thunder at 4. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then I had Minions, and then I had Top Gun and Nope. So that's kind of how I think it's going to pan. But hey, again, anything.
I think that DC thing is going to do a little bit better than Nope, but I think it's certainly
I have DC on there like right under Nope. And I'm wondering if Black Phone is going to like come in and totally upset that, but I don't know.
I think I had that in my number 10 spot because I think that's going to
put Elvis above it. I think Elvis is going to edge it out. I don't
know. I mean, we'll see. Elvis looks wild. There's a clip that's going around from that film. It's like,
oh wow,
it's Baz Luhrmann. You know how I feel about him.
You know what he does. There were people who put. There was one person who put Elvis as their number 1 of the summer.
That's crazy
in our pool. And
that is crazy.
That was one of the boldest picks.
I mean, hats off to them. If they guess right, I mean,
they were like, this thing is going to do bigger than Bohemian Rhapsody. So, all right, next week on the show, we forgot to say there are a couple of Netflix movies that came out this past weekend. Not a lot else, because we mentioned the stuff in theaters. But if you were looking for something on streaming, there is the new Marmaduke. You could watch that. Owen Wilson Pete Davidson and J.K. Simmons voice characters.
You could do a bunch of things. You can learn how to ride a unicycle.
Yeah, I was about to say you could ride a bicycle. But there's also Along for the Ride, directed by Sofia Alvarez, novel based on a novel. Kate Bosworth, Annie McDowell. I know nothing else about it. But in terms of next week, we also have another big Netflix movie called Senior Year, starring Rebel Wilson, comedy. That's going to be coming out. Sam Richardson, one of my best friends who I've never met, is going to be in that movie. And then a couple other streaming things, because there's Sneakerella, the Disney Plus movie that judging by your reaction, you have no idea what that is.
Oh no, I remember this.
Oh, you remember this? Okay. Yeah,
I remember people were like, "What is this?" when they premiered the trailer. So I don't know. There's
also Firestarter, which again, we've gotten a lot of conflicting stuff about this. That it at first apparently was going to be like simultaneously streaming on Peacock. Now it's like, no, it's going to be in theaters. I'm still seeing though reports of like that it will be on Peacock at the same time. I have no idea what's going on.
I thought it's a dual release. I think it's in theaters and on Peacock. Unless they pulled the Peacock thing.
But I keep seeing like conflicting. We're going to find out because
I think it's on it's going to be on Peacock, but they're kind of trying to downplay that. Like,
I'm upset with Peacock. Look, I'm upset with Peacock right now because I canceled Saved by the Bell season 2. They're dead to me for the foreseeable future. They don't know how to make decisions over there at Peacock. Saved by the Bell, one of the best comedies of the recent years.
Yeah, I know you are certainly quite a fan. I never watched it myself, so I can't talk about it.
That's why I got canceled. They're like, if we can't even win over Will Ashton, what are we going to do?
I mean, I will say without exaggeration, hearing that it got canceled was the only time I had heard anyone other than you talk about this show.
Gosh, that's because your timeline is a mess.
Sure, but, no, it is. What are we talking about next week?
I think we're talking about On the Count of Three, the Gerard Carmichael movie with Christopher Abbott.
That comes out.
Yeah, that is going to be, I think it might already be out in a couple of theaters, and I think they're expanding it.
Okay, yeah, I'd love to talk about that movie.
Yeah, that's from Annapurna, and I'd love to revisit that one with you. We could also talk about Petit Maman and Happening, because we kind of mentioned it in the show, but if we want to jump into those, I'm not as interested in Firestarter or Senior Year, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I can kind of give or take Firestarter. I have no real interest in Senior Year. But I know, I mean, we could bring on Corey Woodruff to talk about On the Count of Three.
I don't know who that is.
Oh, wait. Is this... Oh, God. Am I in the wrong universe again?
What are you talking about, Will? Wrong universe?
No. I gotta get going. I gotta get going.
Yeah, I would love to talk about On the Count of Three. I'd love to rewatch it, too, if I could get a chance. But even if we don't, I think that'd be worth talking about. I don't think I'll be able to rewatch Petit Maman, but again, I remember that movie so easily. I mean, I won't have an issue there.
I would love to talk about Vortex, if you can see that next week.
No, thanks. And then we have Happening, which, that's a tough movie to watch, but it's an important movie considering current events. That's a French film that takes place in the 50s, and I'd love to have somebody on to talk about that movie, maybe do something kind of...
I think that'd be a really great bonus episode.
I think so. So we should look into that. And listeners, as always, write in if you have any other suggestions. But that's kind of where our heads are at for next week. But yeah, if you want to hit us up, please do. Our email is in the show notes, cinemaholicspodcast@gmail.com. And of course, you can find us on social media, Twitter, always DM us. Our DMs are open on there. And of course, don't forget to support us on Patreon if you haven't already, or check out our merch page. All that info is in the show notes. We really appreciate all the support. We'll be back next week for a bunch of movies, it looks like. And until then, we'll see you all on the next one from Unit California. I'm John Negroni.
And for Unit Pennsylvania, I'm Washington.
See you.